So let's get on with the program and what we all came here for. We'd like to invite our three candidates to come onto the stage and take their seats. So let's start our panel discussion, Economic, Social, and Political Inclusion of Immigrant Communities in Toronto. Here are some things to keep in mind. The panel will be in English, although I am told all three candidates are fluent in Spanish, right?
Ah oui, sí.
But the panel discussion will be video recorded and shared by tomorrow through several community and alternative media. Subtitles in Spanish will be available. We respectfully request that everyone turn off or use the silent mode of your cell phone during the panel, as it could create interference with the sound system. We will respectfully ask supporters of each of the candidates to be considerate of the audience as a whole and refrain from engaging in heckling and other forms of disruptions. Finally, we would like to emphasize that aiming to create an inclusive environment, sexist, racist, or otherwise derogatory remarks will not be tolerated, and anyone making such statements will be immediately asked to leave. At this time, I would like to invite the candidates to introduce themselves, and for this, each of the candidates will have 2 minutes. We will start in alphabetical order, initially with Ms. Chow, and then Mr. Ford, and then Mr. Tory. Please start with your presentation.
Want me to be there?
Wherever you want.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. How are you? Good, good. I have a good fortune just before I start, where is the timer? There you are, okay. I have a good fortune to work with your first elected Latin American elected official, school trustee, former school trustee, Ms. Bascunian. She taught me a whole lot about the importance of investing in children, making sure that children achieve high academic performance. And we do know that in this rich city of ours, that there are neighborhoods left behind, where in some neighborhoods, 1 out of 2 persons live in poverty. Many of them are immigrants, many of them from racialized community, and that their children is also trapped in a cycle of poverty. And that's not right. It's not right that young people cannot find a job. It's not right that we have 95,000 households waiting for affordable housing. It's not right that you can't find affordable, accessible, high-quality childcare. Let me tell you, the reason why I'm running for office, is that 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds? 1 minute. Okay, so I'm just learning the timing system. I think it's important that we invest right now so that we can collectively work with each other, for each other, that we can invest in the future, and that is so important because everyone deserves a good start in life, a good chance, and we together will create a city where no one is left behind, that everyone counts. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Well, hello, friends. When immigrants come to this country, and a lot of them go to major cities because there's the job, it's key that we have a job for them here, a good paying job. We have created 56,000 jobs in the last 4 years. And when I go out, and I just came back from a very high immigrant area, Jane and Finch, just came back half an hour ago. Do you know what they want? They want to be able to get to a job. They want proper transit. They don't want to be treated separately. My friends behind me want to give them a 2-tier transit system. They want to rip up the roads on Finch and put an LRT down the middle of it. They want fair and equitable transit for them as well, not just for some parts of the city. They want subways. They want to be able to get from point A to point B. They want to broaden the horizon on being able to get good employment. I was in the far reaches of Scarborough the other day. The number one question is, can we get a subway out in Scarborough? I told them it was coming. But more importantly, they were telling me it takes anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. Once they get on a bus, then they hop on a subway, then they go hop on an LRT, then they get onto a streetcar. They want fair and equitable transit. And I'm the only candidate on the stage tonight that's going to give it to them. We will deliver subways to the people along Shepherd, along Eglinton, and for sure along Finch, and we're going to have the downtown relief line until everyone can get jobs, and good jobs in this city. Thank you.
Well, good evening, buenas noches, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us here tonight. I have spent the last number of years of my volunteer life trying to encourage the kind of citizen participation we saw a lot of on the presentation tonight, and it was a very interesting presentation. And that is because I believe that the engagement of every single citizen from every corner of this community with government and with business and with labor is going to represent the best opportunity we have, not just to benefit those people as individuals, but also to take the city from good, which it is, to great, which it can be. And I mean that in the context of including people, all people, in all of those endeavors, and that includes the Spanish-speaking peoples of Toronto, who I believe have not yet been given the opportunity to be fully involved. And we saw some of that in the research we just saw a moment ago. And that is not because, as we know, because we saw some of them in the video too, that is not because of a lack of incredibly talented, accomplished, professional, and other kinds of people that exist in these Spanish-speaking communities, but notwithstanding that they exist, and we know they exist, they haven't yet been fully included. And I intend to make it as a top priority, as a first project, because it's coming upon us right away and it gives us a huge opportunity to make the Pan Am Games a priority for us in this area to engage people. It's not just about engaging and including some of our most fast-growing and dynamic communities in a project like the Pan Am Games. It's about jobs, and it's about economic opportunity. The Pan Am Games gives us an opportunity for some of our Pan-American Spanish-speaking communities to get really involved, not just in the games, but in using them as an opportunity to attract more jobs and more investment and grow businesses that are here. And I think that is job one that we have to improve the lives of Torontonians. Yes, we have to build the transit to connect people to jobs, but we've got to have the jobs coming here and the investment coming here. I look forward to discussing many other challenges that are in front of us over the course of the evening. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
We'll move forward to the question part of the debate, and essentially there will be no rebuttals. Each one of the candidates will have 3 minutes to answer the question. And I should tell you that the 4 main questions were formulated by participating organizations and sent to the candidates in advance. The questions will cover the following topics: building an equity-based budget, extending enfranchisement to permanent residents, improving immigrant employment, and breaking poverty among immigrants. So perhaps we can get to the first question. Building an equity-based budget. I'll give a very short preamble and then we will go to Mr. Ford. Budget decisions have a profound impact on the lives of Torontonians. A budget has the capacity to identify and address health and social inequalities. On March 13th, 2014, the City of Toronto released its new neighborhood rankings based on 15 criteria measuring health, economics, political participation, and education. All the scores were out of a maximum of 100 points. The lower the score, the higher the level of total inequities faced by the neighborhood. The Black Creek neighborhood is at the bottom of the list of this equity score, with an equity score of 21, while Lawrence Park North is at the top with a score of 92. Black Creek, where 60% of the residents are immigrants, has nearly a quarter of its residents on social assistance, a third living on low incomes, and a lower high school graduation rate compared to the city average. In a preliminary study done by residents and local organizations in the Jane and Finch community, there is interesting data showing that the distribution of the community partnership and investment grants is not reflective of the needs of the community. In the study, North York West, which includes wards 7, 8, and 9, where Black Creek is located, received $921,055. This is an area that encompasses 148,465 residents. So $921,000 for 148,000 residents. Whereas the downtown east area, which includes wards 29, 30, and 31, received $2.2 million for an area that includes 151 residents. If elected mayor, how would you ensure that the funding decisions are made with an equity lens? Let's go to Mr. Ford first.
Well, thank you very much. I've been fighting the same situation down there for 4 years. 4 years saying downtown always gets double what the suburbs get. It doesn't matter if it's a skating rink, if it's a subways, and I will change that when I'm mayor on October 27th. And I'll tell you how I'm going to change it. There's something called Section 37 money. Section 37 money, if a developer develops a condo or builds something and they want to add a few more floors, they negotiate with a local councillor, there's a few $100 million in 4 wards all downtown because there's development. There isn't huge development up in Rexdale. Not that we don't want it, there isn't. There isn't huge development in parts of Scarborough or even parts of North York. The Section 37 money has to be split equally amongst everyone. My friends downtown, the councillors, it's all about equality. But when it comes to money, there's no equality, it's in their pocket. That's how it works down there. You've heard me numerous times. What I'd also do, I would give tax incentives for companies to go into high priority neighborhoods. Let's give them an incentive to build a 500,000 square foot warehouse to make sure they can employ people right across the board. And then we go back to transit again. We fought for 4 years to build subways. And I find it amazing how some politicians talk out of both sides of their mouth. They don't believe in giving you fair transit, I can assure you. You wonder why we fight down there sometimes? Because when I see one group getting subways, and I see my 2 friends here promoting that, they're from downtown, nothing wrong with that. I am fighting for the suburbs and downtown. I have no problem with subways downtown, but when you have 630,000 people, 26% of the population in Scarborough, that has 2 subway stations, if you want to count Victoria Park on the border, we'll throw in 3. Something is wrong. We have over 300,000 people in Etobicoke with 3 subway stations. Something is wrong. We have to make sure we have subways. It's a critical part of our economy. It's a critical part of connecting the city. And it's more than just south of Bloor or north of Bloor. It's about being inclusive. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Tory, you would be next.
Well, thank you very much. I think the first thing we have to do is bring something to the budget-making process, 2 things that have really been lacking, one more so than the other. The one we've started to make some progress on is what they call participatory budgeting, which is where citizens, people in the city actually get involved in the process. We've made some progress here, but not enough, because I think that if people were able to take part in the process to an even greater extent, to make known their own particular needs from their own communities, facilities, this is going to help decision makers to make the right decisions. But secondly, I think what we've lacked, and this is something that I think Urban Heart, for example, now under the auspices of St. Mike's Hospital and others, bring to the table, is some objective measurement. You heard some of it measured in the preamble to the question. And it isn't meant to create tensions or rivalries or jealousies between different parts of the city, but the fact of the matter is now that because of a failure to use objective measurements as much as we should be doing in deciding on the allocation of scarce money, you end up in a situation where often the areas of the city that have the greatest need are the ones that end up somehow with less of the money on just about any basis you measure it, whether it's relative to rates of unemployment, whether it's relative to rates of poverty, whether it's relative even to the population. And so I think that that is the next thing we have to do, which is to move, as the question asked, to a much more objective measurement of these things, or as the question put it, look at it through an equity lens. I think this has to include a much greater focus on the education system, for example, and it's not included to a significant, specific extent in the heart calculation of what the health is of different parts of the city. And I think this is absolutely important because for kids, for adults, and for the community as a whole, the schools are a hugely underutilized asset for people to sort of bring the community up and be the place that brings it up. I've expressed concern before, for example, of something that again exacerbates this, which is school fundraising. I expressed concern as a broadcaster about this, about schools rely so much on outside parental fundraising now. This automatically conveys an advantage to those areas where it's easier to raise money compared to those where it hasn't been, and I think we've got to look at that. And then I think we have to move on to look at the long-term sustainability of this, because even if you have annual budgetary allocations that are fairer because you've based it on objective criteria, real need for recreational facilities, real need for assistance with employment, real need for programs after school and so on, you have to look at the sustainability of that, because part of the problem we all know with government grants is they come on whatever basis and then they go. And that is a serious, serious problem if we're looking to tackle these kinds of things. And I think as well, I'll confine my comments to, we have to take jobs out to these communities. There's no question about that. We have to take jobs out to the communities. My One Toronto Jobs program has two specific initiatives, one in North York and one in Scarborough, that will use the tax tools the city has to create jobs in those neighborhoods close to where people live, as opposed to all the jobs being created somewhere else. And finally, we've got to allocate more Section 37 money to affordable housing. Thank you.
We have to grow the grant programs because we know that every dollar that the city contributes to a nonprofit organization, everyone gets a lot back because of the volunteers, because of the fundraising efforts of everyone. And it is not fair that groups and areas that need the most get less. So one way to tackle it is to look at the report, do a report card, and show the needs and then what gets given out. And as long as you contrast it continuously and put out an action plan and say that let us make sure this gets leveled within 4 years, then there will be progress. If you can measure it, then you can get results. Let me give you an example. When I was a city councillor, when the city first amalgamated, low-income seniors and children did not get free dental care. And I thought that was not fair, because just the old city of Toronto, which is downtown in North York, the children and seniors have it. Why not in Scarborough, in North York, and Etobicoke? So I made sure, when I was a city councillor and insurance advocate, that every part of the city, no matter where you came from, which neighborhood you're from, that if you have low income, less than $30,000, seniors and children will get a free dental program. That is something that I was able to accomplish. And then I thought, we need to do more. What about good food in schools, nutritious food in school? Why is it that high priorities neighborhood do not have such a program? Only in the Old City and North York. Not good enough. So I said, let us get all the servers right across the city, especially in areas where children are in fact going to school hungry. And as a result, we now have programs across the city, whether in Scarborough, Weston, North York, and Etobicoke. We can do so much more. I've done it in the past as a city councillor. I can do it as your mayor. And we can accomplish it. So in my platform, I said I would make sure that 36,000 more children will get good, nutritious food in school, mostly in priority neighborhoods. That 40 neighborhoods will have good after-school programs for our kids, 6 to 12 years old, mostly in priority neighborhoods. Let's come together to make it a reality, and we can get this done together. Thank you.
Question 2, extending enfranchisement to permanent residents. As we said before, over 50% of the people living in Toronto were born outside of Canada, and 1/3 of them arrived in Canada in the last 10 years. This makes Toronto the city with the highest concentration of permanent residents in Canada. However, despite being a vital part of the city's fabric, permanent residents are not able to directly participate in the city's politics. A 2013 background report by city staff argued that extending the municipal vote to permanent residents is the right thing to do because, and I quote, these residents contribute to the financial viability of Toronto as property taxpayers and consumers of city programs with user fees without representation. Close the quote. In June of last year, Toronto City Council agreed to request the relevant provincial and federal bodies to make the necessary changes to the relevant laws that would allow permanent residents to vote in municipal elections. While this was a very encouraging first step towards full political participation of immigrant communities in Toronto, there is much more to be done before the approximately 360,000 permanent residents, cardholders in the city, can head to the polls along with those of us who are Canadian citizens. Without consistent municipal leadership to bring about this timely reform, there is a risk that the extension of voting rights will languish between different government departments. If elected mayor, what role will you play to ensure that permanent residents have a voice in the way the city they call home is being run? Let's start with Mr. Tory, then Ms. Chow, and then Mr. Ford.
Well, thank you for the question, and of course the presentation we saw earlier on dealt with this quite directly. And I'll answer the core of the question first, and I'll answer it in a way that won't be universally popular inside this room, but I've had a view on this consistently for some period of time, and my view has not changed. And that is that on the core question of whether or not we should be extending voting rights to people who are not citizens of Canada, I would say no, we should not. Now, I will say that the province has this under its active consideration, and it will take into account the views of all kinds of people, including, I hope, all the people in this room and many, many others. But my main reason for this, I will be honest with you, is that I think there are some, and there must be, on a continuing basis, some unique attributes and rights that go with Canadian citizenship. And I think that under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, permanent residents and people just in the country have the full protection, as they should, of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They have access to the healthcare system and so on. But I think that there are a couple of core rights that people don't have who are not Canadian citizens. One, for example, would be the right to have a Canadian passport, and one is the right to vote or not to vote if you are or are not a citizen. And I wouldn't seek to change that. Now, I will say that there is a major issue that I think would go some distance to allowing people to participate in this aspect of our democracy faster, namely the slow processing, unacceptably slow processing of citizenship applications. Because I think if the government made a greater effort and put greater resources behind having people qualify sooner for their citizenship along the timelines that are spelled out in the legislation, then people could vote sooner after their arrival to the country. In the meantime, I looked at the heading, the language that was contained under the word verdict on the screen during the course of the presentation that talked about informal means of engagement as being something that could lead to some very positive results. And this is something that I was very much committed to as a volunteer citizen, as the head of Civic Action. And that goes all the way from the participatory budgeting, where we make a conscious outreach to people in particular who are from newcomer communities, people who are permanent residents but not yet citizens, including members of the Latin communities represented here tonight. It includes programs extended citywide, like the one that's being introduced in the planning department called Growing Conversations, which has a specific focus on reaching out to people who are newer comers to the country and making sure they get involved in planning decisions. Why not do that with respect to everything? It includes ensuring, because there is no reason why we can't have appointments to agencies and boards and commissions of the city that include permanent residents and members of the Spanish communities, for example. And so I think there are many other ways to reach out and engage people in the civic process, but I'm being honest in saying to you that I do not and have not supported the notion that people who are not citizens of Canada should have the right to vote in any elections, not just municipal. Thank you.
Well, does landed immigrant pay property tax? Yes. Does a renter pay property tax for their rent? Absolutely. In fact, they pay higher property tax. And many of the renters are, in fact, landed immigrant, so they pay property tax big time. Do people that pay TTC fares, landed immigrant, do they pay? Yes. What about water bill? Do they pay? Yes. 9% increase. Do they pay? Yes. Hydro bill. Do they pay? Landed immigrant? Absolutely. Small business owners. A new immigrant coming to the city, starting a small business. Do they pay small business or medium-sized business property tax? Yes. Now, if you pay all of these taxes, why should you not have the opportunity to vote for someone that can spend your tax properly? I can see that, well, income tax and citizenship, all immigration, all these federal issues, remember I used to be a member of parliament, all of these federal issues that perhaps, okay, because you're not a citizen, that you have no right to vote as, you know, who's your prime minister or your member of parliament. But surely, those day-to-day activities, whether your garbage get picked up, whether police would get, you know, if you call, and, you know, whether there's a good police service, all of those day-to-day service, then no matter whether you're a landed immigrant or whether you're a citizen, you pay for it, you actually should have a say on how these services is run. That's what your local politicians are supposed to do for you. So yes, I absolutely support the right of landed immigrants to have a vote in municipal election. I have said so for many years, and I am very clear. And with me as your mayor, you will see me advocating to the provincial and the federal government so that every person in this city, if you're paying property taxes, you should have a right to vote for the municipal government. Thank you.
Well, it's one of the times I'm going to agree with you, Mr. Tory. I didn't vote for the right for landed residents to vote. I'm going to tell you the reason. There's special things when you become a Canadian citizen. One, as Mr. Tory said, is you have a passport. The other is the right to vote. I've been in that situation I've been down that road in the United States. I pay high taxes, as we're standing right now in the United States. I have a residence in the United States. And believe me, I wanted to vote in the last presidential election. But I understood, unless I became a citizen, that's one of the things that I wasn't able to do, even though I paid taxes. But what I will do as mayor, my door will always be open. You will always have a voice, no matter if you're a Canadian citizen or you aren't a Canadian citizen. And if you want your input at City Hall, there's something called ABCs, Agencies, Boards, and Commissions. Come down, as long as you're a resident of Toronto, put your application in to sit on the TTC board. There's no rules. We've never asked anyone, can I see your passport? Matter of fact, in 4 years, I've never asked anyone, can I see your passport? I don't know if someone is a Canadian citizen or not when I go to Mrs. Jones' house or Mr. Smith's house to help them out, and I don't care. I'm there to help them. But I encourage all Canadians to get involved in the city, voice your opinion. You will have a very, very loud voice, as you've had under the Ford administration for the last 4 years. And I will be your voice, as I am for a lot of new Canadians in this city. And when you call me, I'll show up, and I will help you. I'm a strong believer when you arrive in Canada, you should have the right for education. You should have the right to health care. You should have the right for legal services. That's what I believe. And what I also believe is we have to expedite the process with the federal government. I've talked to so many people that have told me they're an engineer, and now I'm a taxi driver, but I have all these skills. I honestly believe the federal government has to expedite this process through a lot quicker than it is right now. I've referred so many people that have come to me and say, can you help me? I said, this is a federal issue, but I've put them in touch with their local MP, and I back them 100%. Thank you.
Question 3 deals with improving immigrant employment. According to the Toronto-based Institute of Work and Health, over 50% of recent immigrants who are working end up in jobs for which they are overqualified. In fact, studies from the Wellesley Institute found that fully 19% of recent immigrants in Toronto are working at minimum wage, more than twice the rate of all employees. And among the survival jobs that internationally trained immigrants often resort to are customer service, daily temp work, self-employment, and other precarious forms of employment. The same report showed immigrant workers in Toronto were subjected to widespread violations of provincial employment standards, including vacation or vacation pay, the statutory deductions for employment insurance, and other mandatory rights. Despite not rejecting such survival jobs in their settlement process, immigrants continue to suffer from high rates of unemployment. In fact, labor market data from January 2014 shows that university graduates who've been in Canada 5 years or less are more than four times likely to be unemployed than their Canadian-born counterparts. If elected mayor, to ensure that immigrants in Toronto are able to secure fairly paid and meaningful jobs, which one of the following two avenues would you prioritize and why? Number 1, increasing the number of municipal paid internships, issuing a call to action to the private sector, and providing funding for nonprofits wishing to offer internships. Or option 2, reviewing the city's employment equity policy and strengthening its practices of employment and contractual services. We'll start with Ms. Chow, and then Mr. Ford, and then Mr. Tory.
I understand how soul destroying it is when a trained person can come into this country and not able to find a job they're trained for. I watched how it destroyed my dad. My dad was an educator, was a school superintendent. When he first came to this country, he could not, even though he spoke fluent English, he could not find a job teaching. There wasn't enough teaching jobs around. It was difficult. He learned how to drive taxi. That didn't work out very well. He tried delivering Chinese food. That was difficult. And he was never able to find a job that used his skills that he had throughout most of his life. And it's really difficult. That's why I will work hard to look at cities' employment equity policies, because we need a city service that reflect who we are. We need people that protect us to make sure that they are reflective of the people they are protected. The service that are provided by the city needs to be, the people that deliver the service also need to reflect the population they serve. So having employment equity policy, which hasn't been updated for 10 years, we need to upgrade it, we need to make it better, we need to renew it, and yes, it needs to be done. Now, having said that, I think it's also important we talk to the private sector to say that they too should provide bridging programs, mentorship programs, internship programs for new residents. Yes, we need to make sure that the credentials and degrees are being recognized. But having done that, people also need the first jobs. If you do not have the first Canadian experience, you're never able to find another job, right? Because they say you don't have Canadian experience, you never get Canadian experience. How are you going to start? So we need those programs, and there are many organizations out there that provide the mentorship program, that provide the bridging programs. They need more funding support from the city so that they can go to the private sector and say that, yes, do know that if you hire these people, these newcomers, they can provide the best employee service you will ever have. Take the risk and provide the support to the private sector. That is what's important. That's what the city government can do. We need to incorporate and include everyone into our economy, that no one should be left behind, because it is very difficult to find a good job as a new immigrant.
Well, I think the most important thing is to make sure they have a job when they come here. It's easy to say, let's get a job, but the economy has to be booming. The way we give someone a job is making sure that we attract businesses. The way we attract businesses is by keeping taxes low, giving companies incentives to come here to Toronto. There's a reason why a lot of new Canadians migrate into Toronto. They know Toronto is thriving. It is booming like no city right now in North America. And I say even the world. When we look at the economy, KPMG says we are the most tax competitive market in the entire world. I also believe we need to go to the Ontario College of Trades. So if someone does have a trade, like I was saying on my earlier question, if someone's an engineer, let's run through the process a lot quicker than what we're doing. Let them write the test immediately. If you're an engineer somewhere from another country, your skills should be equally in Canada. But don't make them go through another 3-4 years of college or university when they've already went through 3 or 4 years where they've come from. Let them get right to it. Let them write the exam. And if they pass, I'm using an engineer as an example only, boom, they get the seal. If they don't, then they go back to school, but give them an opportunity. It must be easier to transfer the skills to skilled immigrants. The other area is getting the private sector involved, but there's one that stands out the most, and it's from the Central Ontario buildings trade. I was involved, I went over to Hammerheads, it's called Hammerheads. They get young people that are finished high school that may not have the funds or the skill set to go to the next level, to college or university. They're an incredible organization. They train them for a skill. They train them to be an electrician. They'll train them to be a carpenter. They train them on so many different skills, but they don't stop there. And that's, I have to mention the gentleman's name who runs it. It's James St. John. He's the head of Hammerheads and the Central Ontario Buildings Trade. He goes one step further. As he says, sometimes it turns into a boot camp to get these kids in line, but he contacts the big developers. He'll contact the Tridells of the world or the Minkies, and he actually places them there, but he also holds them accountable, making sure they're ready at 6 o'clock in the morning to be on the job site. But they also leave, sometimes making $30 an hour. One young man brought in a check and showed the rest of the students he was making $80,000 after going through this. Those are the programs I support and I will support when I'm mayor on October 27th. Thank you.
Well, I think first, in dealing with the question that was raised here, one of the things we have to do is make sure the laws are enforced, because there are too many people who are presently being taken advantage of. But then it comes down to a number of other things we can do. I will start with paid internships. I had an experience starting 10 years ago as a volunteer to recruit companies to create opportunities for skilled immigrants to go and show what they could do in a 4-month paid internship. Guess what the results were? 90% of the people who took one of those internships and received one from the companies who were participating got a full-time job. In many cases, a full-time job with the company that gave them the internship. And that's because, of course, they knew that they had the talent to do what was necessary to fill the job, but they just needed that chance. It's the old Canadian experience trap that people were in. You need Canadian experience to have a job here, except how can you get any Canadian experience if you can't have a job? And so I think we need to have far more of those internships. Secondly, and I'll agree with Doug Ford on this point, we have to make sure people who are qualified coming from other countries are able to qualify here much faster. You know, they have what they call bridging programs that allow people to kind of Canadianize their skills, and they're good programs, and that pretty much everybody who comes through them ends up in a job in their chosen profession. But the trouble is there are far too few spots in those programs as funded by the federal and provincial governments and conducted at some of our universities and colleges. We've got to get the professions on board, because I think we all know that some of them have made some effort, but many of them have not made the effort they have to make to actually include in their ranks faster people who have come from other countries and practiced for years. We have to bring jobs closer to the people. I'll tell you a story about a man, it's a true story, a young African man with years of experience in the financial services business. He came to Toronto, applied not once but twice. In between applications, he went and upgraded his skills. And both times his resume wasn't even answered. Like there wasn't even an answer back when he sent it in online saying, got your resume, get back to you at some point. Heard nothing. He went to a job fair in Regent Park, sat across the table from one of our big banks, and was hired on the spot. Because they said, look at this resume, look at this experience, we're talking to you, you're going to be terrific. He got a full-time job because we brought jobs to the people in their communities instead of waiting around for people to figure out how to go through the labyrinth of finding a job in those companies. And last but not least, I think we have to take jobs into people's neighborhoods. And that's why my One Toronto Jobs program specifically provides for a high-tech corridor that we would create using the tax incentives that the city has on its books now in the area of northwest Toronto, and another corridor around the Scarborough subway, for startups and people who are risk takers who want to see their businesses able to be incubated. And that will encourage a lot of people. You know, people who come from the Latin countries are entrepreneurs. They're people who have a strong set of values and a strong set of entrepreneurial skills, and if we can give them a chance to show what they can do on their own, to not only create a job for themselves, but for other people, they'll do it, and that's what I intend to do. Thank you.
So, question number 4 deals with breaking poverty among immigrants. According to the 2011 census, almost 1 in 4 of Toronto's 2.8 million residents lives in poverty. For immigrants, it is even higher at almost 1 in 3, while for recent immigrants, it is even worse at almost 1 in 2. This poverty is not distributed equally across the city. As recent studies demonstrate, residents of African, Asian, Middle Eastern, Caribbean, and Latin American backgrounds are much more likely to be living on low incomes. Childhood poverty stands at 50% or more in immigrant-heavy communities, but goes dramatically down to 5% in non-recent immigrant communities. For these excluded communities, poverty also means living in overcrowded, unhealthy apartments, and being prevented as immigrant parents, especially immigrant mothers, from pursuing employment or educational objectives due to the lack of safe and affordable daycare. If elected mayor, which one of these two avenues, as a means of tackling the issue of immigrant poverty in low-income neighborhoods, would you prioritize and why? Number one, childcare, tripling the investment rate and using innovative models to improve the current system, which supports only 28% of Toronto's low-income children, and successfully serving the 21,000 children on waiting lists for cities' subsidized childcare spaces. Or two, housing, increasing the rate of creation of designation of rent geared to income units to catch up to the 90,000 households currently on the waiting list with expected waiting times of 12 years. We will start with Mr. Tory, and then Ms. Chow, and then Mr. Ford.
Well, first of all, I will pick one of the two options as requested in a moment, but I want to start by saying that I think there's something more fundamental, and we've been discussing it tonight already in a number of different contexts, and that is the crucial importance of making sure people have a good, lasting, productive, permanent job. Because there is every chance that if people are put in that position where they have secure employment and better employment for those who are either unemployed or underemployed, they are going to be themselves in a much better position to support their families in every single respect. And I think that is fundamental at the heart of all of this in terms of trying to alleviate poverty. And it's why I place such huge importance in my own campaign and my own platform on attracting jobs and investment and making an environment here where people who have an entrepreneurial idea, people who want to take a risk, can find every encouragement to do so in this city. If I had to choose between the two, I would pick housing because I think everybody has to live in a house, and it should be a house that is a safe and properly kept and secure house. So I would start, and I'll just make brief mention of this, by making sure that we accelerate to the maximum extent possible the repair of the existing public housing units that we own in the city. We have let those slide for years and years and years to the point where we have hundreds of millions of dollars in undone repairs. Secondly, I would see us form more partnerships of the kind that have been successfully formed and executed on in neighborhoods like Regent Park and Alexandra Park, where you got the private sector, which we need to help us with this, and nonprofit groups and the government together, governments plural, to help redevelop and renew some of those neighborhoods. And I think that will both renew those neighborhoods in many different respects. If you've seen in Regent Park, not only have you seen the housing stock begin to be renewed, but you've seen a huge accompanying renewal and revitalization of community facilities and the like. It's a success story in the making. I would make more land available from city-owned bodies like the Toronto Parking Authority and the Toronto Community Housing Corporation to be made available to developers to build affordable housing on those lands. I think given the right kind of opportunity with that land being put in, many developers will respond positively in a competitive sense to build affordable housing on those lands. We have to have more Section 37 money devoted to affordable housing. At present, only 6% of the Section 37 money you heard discussed earlier that comes from the proceeds of all the development of condos and so on is actually going to affordable housing. That is too low a number. We have to look at innovative financing for affordable housing, things like social impact bonds that are in use now or beginning to be in use in the province of Saskatchewan. And I think, and I'll finish on this point, we have to advocate to the other governments because all of these things cannot be done by city taxpayers and property taxpayers alone. We need the active, consistent support of the other governments in order to be able to do what we must do to address affordable housing as one of the two choices I was given. Thank you.
We need to have good jobs, and one way to start is to ask companies that are doing business with the City of Toronto to sign a community benefits agreement that they have to hire young people and also provide training if necessary. We can create 5,000 jobs to start for young people, creating hope in the community. Let's get that done. This program is also supported by the provincial government, and our Premier, Kathleen Wynne, has said to Metrolink, and Metrolink have signed a community benefits agreement when they're building the Eglinton Crosstown, which means that thousands of jobs will also be created while building the LRT. We can do so much more across the city by creating good jobs. Number two, yes, absolutely, let's create more affordable housing. 15,000 units of affordable housing we can do together by asking developer to build these buildings, that 20% of these high-rises needs to be affordable. The city will defer the development charges of these buildings. We can fast-track their approval. We can make sure that if they have higher density, that money that comes from the bonus can then be put forward to make the units affordable. We can create 15,000 units of affordable housing that way. And lastly, we absolutely need to provide support for our families. So I, as your new mayor, will provide 3,000 affordable, high-quality childcare services so mom and dad can go to work. That is a comprehensive package that would alleviate people in living in poverty. It is very, very important that we have a concrete plan, which I have, and everything being costed out, so that is not just a wish list. My other two friends here are basically providing a wish list without concretely spelling out how each of these will be spelled out, how it can be done, how fast it can be done, how many affordable housing units, how many jobs, and how many child care services. We know if it's not measured, it cannot then be delivered. It cannot be accountable. If you don't tell people where the money is coming from, it won't happen. So I believe it's important in this election. I am very, very upfront to tell you, straightforward in telling you, that if we want better services for our families, if we want to lift people out of poverty, we must invest right now so that we can collectively say to each other, we will support each other, we will lift the entire neighborhood out of poverty.
Well, I'll answer both the questions. Child care. I have a soft spot for single moms. They work all day, they work their backs off, and the child care cost sometimes is more than half of what they bring home. We have upgraded 26 child care centers. We're building a brand new child care center. I will always support that program. Housing. We had over 300 dilapidated houses, holes run down. Some of these houses, just the location was worth over $1 million. We have a backlog of repairs from here to Timbuktu. We need the money. We put a motion out, try to work with the rest of the councillors to see the light. You sell the 311 homes, you raise a couple $100 million, you make sure the people in the homes that were displaced have a better home. Put the money into the repairs. That's what we need to do. But more importantly, from all this, you have to understand how these people are living. If you haven't been there, if you haven't knocked on these apartments or TCHC units, and you see the cockroaches, see holes in the wall, you see people with bed bugs that can't even sleep in their bed, you see the stoves don't work or the fridge doesn't work, You have to be there and understand it. And my friend John, you haven't done it. I've done it for 4 years. I've seen it. You come from a totally different world than the rest of us. I want to quote something here. In 2004, when asked about the golf clubs that John Tory was part of, since he's been 16 years old, this says it all. His answer was, it's really a matter of economics and whether people really want to be in a club when there's no one like them. You gotta be kidding me. You have to be kidding me that there's no one like them. This is a club that excluded all sorts of racists up till 1997 that you've been belonging to since you're 16 years old. You have to understand the challenges, and if you don't go into these homes, you don't talk to the people, you don't spend time with them, you'll never, ever understand. Not one of us in this room, including myself, will ever see the inside of that private club, I can assure you.
Well, let's move on to the. Can we please move on to the questions now from the audience? These are the questions that were collected in a box in the lobby, and they will be now, I guess. There we go. Put up on the screen. You can see that. And there were two criteria there were two specific concepts that were used to select the questions. One of them was to make sure that it pertained to municipal affairs, and secondly, that it was as inclusive of more immigrant communities as possible. So the first question is, how do you think the city should support the health and social support needs of new immigrants and refugees? And let's start with Ms. Chow.
How much time?
And you would have 3 minutes as well.
3 minutes.
Yes.
Is
Thank
there
you.
a rebuttal?
No, there's no rebuttal.
Okay. When I did a survey of all the social service agencies and asked them, of all the services that you provide most right now, which one is the most important? And I asked them to rank. And you know what the social service agencies that serve refugees and new immigrants said? Mental health support. Because it is quite difficult to come into this country, to learn a new language, learn how to fit in, try to find housing, trying to find a job. It's difficult. And yes, immigrant services can provide all of that, but if there is no support, counseling, not just social support, mental health support, because often if we don't provide that, some of the families, they will slip through the crack. So for me, it's important that the City of Toronto's grant programs, not only should it support agencies that provide housing, employment, and recreation activities for newcomers and refugees, it should also provide social support. That is critically important. On top of that, we need to work together with these agencies to say that some of these new immigrants and refugees are very entrepreneurial. Let us hook them up with existing services, existing small businesses, that the small businesses that are successful in Toronto can help these newcomers to start their own business because they're very entrepreneurial also. In exchange, the existing small business would learn how to export their service, export their materials, export their merchandise to the person's home country, like Mexico or other places. Right? So it's a win for the businesses in Toronto. It's a win for the newcomers and refugees so they can start a small business, so they can use their entrepreneurial spirit. So combine all of that, we can provide much better support for new immigrants and refugees so they can become productive members of our society as quickly as possible.
I'll never forget my dad telling me about how he started the business. And he came from a family of 9 kids, no father, died, he was the youngest of 9. And this was during the Depression. And he told me, son, there's one thing harder than starting a business in this country. He said, and I said, what? He said, imagine coming from another country, not knowing the language, and starting a business. And I'll never forget him telling me that. And saying that, I think it's essential we put money into these communities, number one, to make sure they get educated and they're versed on the English language. They want to come here. And we have those programs. We have them in the city right now until they can communicate when they go to a job or when they start a business. So they don't have to just have their business within their community. They can broaden it right across the city. That is absolutely critical. And you have to give them the environment to start the business. No one wants to start the business when an area is a high priority neighborhood and all of a sudden they put their store there and 6 months later the traffic's not flowing for many different reasons. We have to make sure we have a vibrant neighborhoods right across the city. As I said earlier, make sure we give incentives to businesses, no matter how big or how small they are, out in Etobicoke, Scarborough, and North York, East York, and York, and even downtown. The other area is they open the store, and all of a sudden, there's construction in front of their store, and they're trying to start the store and try to make a living. There should be some sort of tax incentive when there's a disruption, not anything to do with themselves, but from the city, be it construction or building subways, let's hope, or destroying a street like St. Clair with LRTs. There should have been support, because talking to the people in St. Clair, numerous people had to close their businesses down. Nothing to do with them. Had a lot to do with the LRT and changing their community. I can assure you, I will have the environment for all Torontonians to be able to start a business and thrive. Thank you.
Well, I will start where I've started a number of answers tonight, because I just believe it is so fundamental to people's well-being, including new arrivals and refugees, and that is with employment. And we were asked specifically to address areas the city can play a role in terms of the delivery of services and supports for people. And I think there is no area more important than to help people get a good job and get a good job as quickly as possible. And that includes all the things we've discussed earlier on this evening, whether it's the bridging programs, whether it's job fairs, whether it's paid internships that are going to give people a chance to show what they can do. So employment is number one. Housing has to be number two, because people need a proper place to live. And again, we've discussed that earlier on, and I think there are things the city can do, some things the city can take leadership on, but many other things they have to do in partnership with not just the other governments, but that's very important, but also, I think, increasingly with the private sector to use their ingenuity and so on to create more affordable housing for people. The third is transit. Transit connects people to jobs. It does many things. It gives people mobility around the city for a number of reasons, but one of the things it does is it connects people to jobs. And then one that was mentioned a moment ago, and that is the whole business of what I will call language and cultural adjustment programs. I think there is a very, very poor connection between the city government and the immigrant communities and the Toronto District School Board, because many, not all, but many of these programs are delivered through the school board, and because the school board is independently run, there isn't the kind of relationship there should be and that there needs to be in order to make sure more of those programs can be more easily accessed by people. But I would go one step further. I've always wondered why we don't take advantage of the fact that we now have, for good or for bad, because I think, again, it's evidence of poor management, when we have years that people wait after they've made their application and basically been accepted to come to the country, years sometimes they wait in other countries where they might not, where they wouldn't have been speaking English, why can't we take advantage of that time to have them learning English before they come when they know they're going to come? And that's sponsored by the Government of Canada or by people here. And I will go and mention one step further when I mention cultural adjustment programs. That's just what I called them. But, you know, language, for example, isn't just about employment. I mean, I think it certainly is going to be a very helpful attribute to be able to speak English or French as one of two official languages, but it's mostly going to be English here in Toronto to get a job. But it isn't just about the job. It's about going to school parent-teacher nights. It's about going to the hospital or the doctor with a health problem with your child or whatever. And I just think in order to be able to be fully included, it is going to be necessary, yes, for us to provide services and so on in people's first languages, but also to make sure that we help them before they come, during the time they come, and after they come to develop that proficiency in English so they can operate here at their absolute top potential. Thank you.
The second question from the audience is up on the screen. Although education is the responsibility of the province and local trustees, certain strategies passed in council, like the Toronto Youth Equity Strategy, have presented opportunities for the city to work with the school boards. As mayor, what will you do to work closer with the school boards? Let's start with Mr. Ford, then Mr. Tory, and we'll finish with Ms. Chow.
Well, we can always work a lot closer with the school boards, but I can speak for myself. I guess I can speak for a lot of councillors. You're in touch with a school board trustee all the time when there's an issue. Swimming pools. Let's just start with swimming pools. Swimming pools was supposed to be under the Board of Education. And some schools have their swimming pools, but all of a sudden it became the City of Toronto's responsibility. And that's no different than the nutrition program, which I think is great, which I've contributed to, that I've helped out with. We work closely with the school boards, day in and day out. What we have to do is make sure we get the proper funding from the province until we can make sure that for instance, the swimming pools are open. So we can have a proper nutrition program, making sure that the burden doesn't fall on the City of Toronto. As I've always said, we're a creature of the province, the City of Toronto. We're underneath their thumb. So I will lobby hard for more funding from the province to make sure that the burden doesn't always fall on the city. I will make sure that we sit down and consult with every single school board trustee, no matter if it's a separate school board or the public school board, or maybe faith-based funding too. It all depends. But again, I will work hand in hand with the province to make sure we have clear communication when it comes to the education system. Because the same kids that are going to that school are going to be the same kids that want to go out, get involved in the community, help out the community, get involved in sports. So it's critical we play a vital role. And another part with the school board, they're selling off all these schools. And it's a huge issue in each area they're selling it. Because what's happening, a developer's coming in, the school's coming down, and a 20-story building's going up. It's critical, again, that we work with the province on making sure that they just don't pull the carpet out from underneath us, because they've been selling school properties right, left, and center, my area, right across the whole city, and make sure we consult with them to make sure there isn't 20, 30-story buildings in our backyard. Thank you.
It's interesting, if you look back over history, it probably was the case that in many years ago, it was the churches that were the hub of the community. And it's interesting as well that that's sort of evolving back to being the case in many communities now, that churches are increasingly playing a more important role than perhaps they did 20 or 30 years ago, back to the role they played. But what had happened in the meantime, I think in a positive kind of development, it is that it was our schools that became the kind of community hub. And I think that if you accept that reality, and accept it not only as a reality, but a desirable reality, that schools where the kids go and that are in the neighborhoods and so on should be the community hubs, then we're not using them to the maximum extent we could. And I think that reflects to some extent exactly what the question presumes, which is an inadequate connection. As good as it may be between some individual councillors and trustees, there isn't the connection between the school board overall and the city government overall to say, how can we work more closely together so that the schools can really become community hubs that can be the place where the language programs are delivered, all of them, where recreation is available, which it is, of course, during the day, sometimes at night, sometimes not, depending on a whole bunch of issues like insurance and things like that. Sports have been mentioned. Childcare is another thing that is happening to some extent, to a greater extent in school buildings, but not to the extent that it could. Seniors and newcomers and young people all together in the same building and maybe even interacting with each other to find a way to create a greater sense of community, which will, I think, lead to a greater inclusion of people who are newcomers to the country because they're going to the neighborhood school with all the other people who live in that neighborhood and doing things together. And I would say libraries. I mean, if we wanted to even expand what I think is the biggest public library network in the world, why couldn't we look at having more of the library's operations inside schools where they already have libraries to some extent and where some of these schools are not fully utilized? And I would mention one last thing, which is, I'll bet if we decided to work more closely together with the school boards, we'd find there were financial opportunities there too, to do things together that could save some money for the same people that are paying the bills at the end of the day, and find ways we could have both of them operate in a way that advantaged the other. And so I just think it's going to be necessary for us to bring these two together. They've come apart, in recent years to some extent, and I think we've got to bring them back together and find these opportunities to once again have schools truly as the community hubs for these all of our communities. Thank you.
I used to be a school trustee, and I was a city councilor also. So I know how to bring both agencies, both public institutions together. I'll give you an example. Bruce School was going to close because of declining enrollment, not as many students there. I was a city councilor at the time. I said, well, why not put in a child care center and maybe some after-school activities, maybe a toy library. And all of these things will bring a lot more children together, bring some of the parents together. And the Board of Education said, that's a good idea. So as a result, we used Bruce School as a pilot project to demonstrate how this school can be a community hub for the entire neighborhood serving children. Bruce School now have breakfast program for kids. It has a good child care program. It has after-school activities. The parents come in occasionally to volunteer. They have a toy library, a mom and kids drop-in program so that, if mom is not working, they can bring the babies and meet other parents. It's called Resource Center. So Bruce School became the community hub of all the kids and all the parents in the neighborhood. We can do so much more. The City of Toronto have just established a task force that will bring the school board and the city closer together. Whether it's the swimming pool issues or community spaces, all of that needs to be worked out. Because think about this, it doesn't make sense if you want to rent a soccer field. Is the soccer field in a school yard? Is it in a community center yard? A lot of people can't really tell. Why can't there be one-stop shop? If the community wants to rent a soccer field, they would go to one agency that could then rent out the space for a good game, right? So all of that can be coordinated with less paperwork, less bureaucracy, so you can rent rooms, rent gymnasium, community centers, all of that to be opened up to the community. And one way to start is bring the school trustee and the city councilors together on the ground level, on the local level, and at the school board and the City of Toronto, have a task force, have them work out all the protocols so that we can coordinate and work together, serving you much better.
So that was the second and last question from the audience. And now we'll move on to the candidates' closing remarks. And I propose that we start with Mr. Tory, then with Mr. Ford, and we'll end with Ms. Chow. You will have, is it 2 minutes or 3 minutes? 3 minutes for your closing remarks. Mr. Tory, you're up.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for an excellent job, well done moderating tonight, and thank you very much for being here and for not just for expressing an interest in your city, but also for expressing an interest in becoming really engaged and really involved in your city. I thought the presentation tonight was really good that we had a chance to see that, and I'm glad it was presented because it indicates just how passionately these communities represented here tonight want to get involved, even beyond voting, to say, look, we want to be involved in the resolution of some of the challenges that we face. I think, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be best addressed by a period of competent, sensible, accountable leadership at the City Hall. I think we need to have a calm and considered environment there, less divisive than we've seen in the last number of years in order to get things done for people. And I think that's going to involve electing a mayor who is able to forge the kinds of relationships with everybody that needs to be a partner. You've listened tonight, and you've heard us talk about the fact that, yes, the members of City Council have to be involved, obviously, in many, many things, if not almost all, that are going to be done or not done by the city. You've heard talk about the other governments and how they're involved, whether it's in immigrant settlement or whether it's in funding for housing or a whole host of other things. And the ability to forge those kinds of productive relationships with those governments are crucial to our ability to move the city forward and to address some of the very specific concerns of these communities that we've heard discussed tonight. And it is going to be also go well beyond City Council and the other governments to the business community, big and small, businesses of all kinds. We need them. We need them to not only be nurtured in what they're doing to create new jobs for people in the Latin communities and other communities where their people are underemployed and unemployed, but we need to get new companies to come here from around the world, attracted by all the things that are good about Toronto, and there are many, but attracted here to invest and to create jobs. And so we need to make that a fundamental priority. And it's not just about business. There have been some tremendous programs. One of them was referred to tonight, and there are others where the unions have showed a leadership role in creating opportunities for people, for apprenticeships and for jobs and for skills training and so on. We need them and the nonprofit organizations. In short, it's all hands on deck, which is why I talk about One Toronto. You know, we've had years since this city was amalgamated. Perhaps some of you even came to the country after it happened. It was a long time ago. But we've had trouble pulling the city together and saying we are going to, on jobs, on transit, we're going to have one city. One of the reasons I want to build Smart Track in such a determined way is because it is going to knit the city together, right across the city, 22 stops, transit from Scarborough to Etobicoke, and it is going to be done in 7 years to provide people with many more transit options than they have today. And so I think in order to do any of this, whether it's the creation of jobs, the attraction of businesses, the building of transit, we have to engage people. And I look forward to being a mayor that is going to engage you and take advantage of that enthusiasm I saw in the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you for the applause. Folks, this is, you know, I deal with new Canadians and immigrants every single day. Every single day. I've worked with new Canadians my whole life. The number one thing they want They want a job, a good paying job. And under this administration, we're delivering good paying jobs. Our city is thriving, it is booming. We ended up having 14 million people from all over the world show up. We've hammered every single record in a positive way in this city. We made sure when it came to the $60 car registration tax that really affects someone that might be making $600, $700, if that, a week, we put that back into their pocket. And when a new Canadian finally saves up enough money to buy a small little apartment, then he wants to sell it and go out and get another one to upgrade, guess what? He gets dinged on $8,000. Or a senior that has a large home and sells it and then maybe wants to buy a smaller condo. That senior gets hit $8,000. I'm the only candidate that will put that $8,000 back in your pocket rather than the government's pocket. I'm the only candidate that represents all the people in Toronto when it comes to transit. Not ripping up the roads like Mr. Tory and Ms. Chow have plans on doing. Not giving fair, equitable transit to the people of Scarborough, North York, York, East York, and Etobicoke. They'd rather rip the roads up and give them LRTs that we all know doesn't work. I was on the corner of Shepherd and Yonge today, and I saw this massive building Tridell's putting up, advertising everywhere. Subway access, subway access, subway access. People want subways. World-class cities have subways. They don't have LRTs ripping up the roads, creating a disaster. It's an economic driver, subways. When I stood outside that building, I looked up and the media was there. I'm thinking, how many jobs were created? Good construction jobs. And a lot of new Canadians get involved in the construction trade. That's what they understand. Thank you, sir. And that's what they understand. There's thousands of jobs. The only way we will be a world-class city on transit if Doug Ford is mayor on October 27th, because I'm building subways from one end of the city to the other end of the city, to Scarborough, to Etobicoke, to North York, York, and East York. And I won't stand by and let my two friends here rip up the roads, cause traffic congestion around this city. We will go right downhill, I can assure you. I'm going to stay the course and have the most prosperous city in this entire world. Thank you.
Our city is at a crossroad. We can continue with 4 years of failed policies where left huge number of people behind. Neighborhoods left behind, children left behind, people not being able to find a job, young people losing hope. We must have a new kind of city, a new set of direction. We need to say no to those that just give you a wish list with no promise of investment, no concrete plan, no suggestion on how they would create affordable housing, how they would create childcare. What about the jobs? Nothing, nothing, all empty promise and false hope. We have 4 years of that. It's enough. It's enough. We need a change. We must have a change. My two friends will say, basically, their view is, what can we stop doing to save money? Now, bottom line is important, but that's where we start. As a leader, we need to look at the dreams and the hopes of people and say that, yes, we can come together and work with each other for each other so that we create better housing. We can move people faster, more childcare, jobs for young people. Yes, we can do that. We need, in this city, a mayor which is a reflection of our city. Our mayor needs to reflect the hopes and dreams of all of us and inspire all of us to work together than we could ever do for ourselves when we work alone. Because we know when we work together, we have the power to make a difference. So, yes, we need a leader that can inspire all of us to come together. So I believe that we have two choices in this election. We can choose to cut, or we can choose to build. We could choose to divide, or we could choose to come together. Let us come together and build a better city, a city that is more caring, a city that says to all of us, no matter where we came from, what skin color, what income, what neighborhood, it does not matter because everyone counts. And let us create a city that is better for all our children so that we can create hope for everyone. Let us do this together. We can get it done on October 27. Vota Olivia Chow. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
So, in closing, we would like to thank all candidates for their time, for coming here, sharing your ideas for the City of Toronto.
One step at a time, don't be living on the line. I don't need a friend.